Hi everyone, I'm Dan Janik. It's time now for our Connect to the Congress segment, and tonight we are joined by Massachusetts Congressman Joe Kennedy, who represents a lot of communities along the South Coast. Congressman, welcome to the segment.
Hey, thanks for having me. Appreciate it.
I know it's a little loud there in the Capitol, but we'll be able to muster through this. Let's talk a little bit about the South Coast Rail. I know that a lot of people are still kind of in amazement that at this day and age, they still can't take a train from the South Coast into Boston. Where are we on that process, and what are you doing to try to make it happen?
Look, this has been a priority for me since I was running for Congress the first time, and residents of the South Coast absolutely need to be able to connect to markets like Boston, and South Coast Rail is an important infrastructure opportunity for residents along the South Coast of Massachusetts and the economic opportunities it brings for the entire region. We've been working in consultation with our state officials and in consultation here down in Washington, D.C. Much of the funding that's going to be provided for that project actually is going to come through the state, where there has been federal funding so far in the preparation for some of the track and bridges we've been advocating for down here in Washington as well. I'm a big supporter of the project and will continue to advocate for it as basically the time comes up.
What's the holdup, Congressman?
I think part of the challenge is just at the moment is securing the funding for it, and for some of the challenges that basically have come up on that is that the project under the Patrick administration and I believe currently under the Baker administration has been largely state funded. There hasn't even been the requests submitted to cover many of those finances, or the big portion of those finances, through a federal grant. So the issue, as we've approached it with our federal teams down here in Washington, D.C., and in consultation with state authorities, have been basically using some federal resources for other transportation projects and then setting aside those state resources for South Coast Rail. And it's basically trying to make the case that this is an important project for the South Coast. Governor Patrick made a big commitment to it, and I think pushed it as aggressively as they could during his years in office. And I know it's something that Governor Baker supports as well. We're going to continue to make the case with him again in the weeks and months ahead.
Have you spoken with Governor Baker and asked him, hey, what's the holdup here with the state funds?
Yeah, I have spoken to the governor about it. We've spoken to a number of state officials about it. I think it's something that, again, the governor would like to do. I think they've obviously run into some of the challenges with other aspects of transportation funding, the team, the Green Line, and others. So I think they're trying to get those squared away. We'll continue to raise it with the governor and raise it with state officials as well to make sure that the resources are allocated to get this ball rolling. It's been going on, obviously, talked about project for decades, and certainly years before I was even in office. Me and our team here is fully committed to doing whatever we can in order to make that project come to fruition.
Let's talk a little bit about the Taunton stabbing spree 2 weeks ago. Obviously an awful tragedy there. It came to light after that there were some flaws with the 911 system, that some of the 911 centers were unmanned or not manned enough. What do you think needs to be done to address that?
Look, I think it's absolutely outrageous when we find out that there's shortfalls with our 911 system, and there, I think, needs to be a full accounting for why such a thing would happen, whether there's state or federal resources that can address it. The fact is, Dan, when people are calling 911, you should be calling because it's an emergency, and it means you've got people in a vulnerable situation, sometimes scared, and certainly in need. And we, as a community, as a society, have to make sure that those needs and obligations are being met. And I think all of us got to step up, and if there's ways that our federal delegation here can address those concerns, we're certainly will champion them.
Congressman, I want to ask you about a Boston Globe article that about you earlier this month, which basically in essence suggested that you were profiting individually off of the drug problem across the region. And I point out that you invested in a Hep C drug that sold at prices most of your constituents couldn't afford, and that you purchased it in 2012 when Hep C was spreading at an alarming rate to this region. You haven't had a chance to address this, and I wanted to give you the opportunity now.
Well, I appreciate it, Dan. Look, the fact is that all of my assets and holdings are managed by an independent financial advisor. I exercise no discretion over what's bought, what's held, what's sold, or when any of that happens. So questions that have been brought up about those holdings, I think, have sparked us to conduct a review, and we're reviewing those policies, but I exercise no control over any of them.
But Congressman, why wouldn't you just call up the investor and say, hey, this isn't a good policy, this isn't a good practice here, please don't invest in that company anymore?
So Dan, again, I don't exercise any control over what to buy or sell, never have on any of those holdings. So and we've done that deliberately to make sure that those are done at arm's length, done by somebody that's independent from any sort of political issue or anything that I could do to influence that process. So we're reviewing those policies and certainly will continue to do so.
What do you say to a constituent who might be watching this and saying, boy, he's a bit of a hypocrite. He's making money off of a drug and he's also very outspoken about the drug problem in the region?
Well, Dan, again, I don't think anybody would doubt my commitment to trying to make sure that people get access to affordable medication. And yes, we clearly have an opioid epidemic that we have to address. Again, I don't exercise any control over the holdings that I have. They're managed and by an independent outside advisor. So again, we're reviewing those policies now, given the questions that came up, and we'll certainly get back to you as that process unfolds.
Will you continue to invest in that company?
Dan, again, they're done by, handled, all of those transactions, all of those efforts are handled by an outside independent advisor that have never said to buy, to sell, or to hold on anything. And I do that deliberately to make sure that all of those holdings are done without and outside of any sort of political pressure.
You were talking a little bit about the drug epidemic. As you know, more people are dying from the drug epidemic in this region than they are car accidents and murders. What are you doing specifically in your role to try to help with this issue here with your constituents?
Dan, we've been working on this for a very long time. It was one of the issues that I ran for Congress, or drove me to run to Congress in the first place. Issues around opioids, leading to Percocet, OxyContin, leading to heroin addiction. And I've been proud to be part of a federal delegation here in Washington that has been advocating for everything from drug take-back days to get drugs off the streets to legislation that we've been able to get passed, creating new task force to actually inform Congress as to what can be done across a broader spectrum of initiatives, as well as trying to increase the prevalence of prescription monitoring programs so that doctors can understand when patients are in fact doctor shopping, and particularly for this region, going from one side of the border, crossing into another state, and shopping for prescriptions and shopping for prescription medication there. This is an issue that is extraordinarily complex. It's a difficult one to address, but it's one that I think Congress has taken some important steps with, even just a couple weeks ago when 18 bills were moved through Congress with broad bipartisan support, and I was proud to have authored one of those bills myself. The next step in this, though, Dan, is also ensuring that there's the funds appropriated to actually make the investments that are going to help, I think, get our arms around this epidemic. And unfortunately, our Republican colleagues need to, I think, step up to the plate. And the president has asked for about $1.1 billion more to actually address those concerns. We haven't yet found another penny for it. So I'll continue to push on that. I've co-authored legislation to do that. Lastly, proud to work with our delegation, a local delegation in Massachusetts, particularly in Bristol County, to bring some additional federal resources in the law enforcement aspect of this problem through what's called a high-intensity drug trafficking area designation from the White House to help with the coordination between local, federal, and state law enforcement authorities to really crack down on illicit use of prescription drugs and the heroin that so often follows. And
right.
That designation, I think, provides important resources to the region to help with that coordination and to try to get these dangerous drugs off the streets.
All right, Massachusetts Congressman Joe Kennedy on his first outing here on our Connect to Congress. Congressman, thanks for your time. We'll see you when you're back here at home.
Hey, thanks so much. Appreciate it.